Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Work in Progress. I'm here with special guest. My other co-host, Sante, could not be here. She's dealing with what everybody else is dealing with, the COVID and all the infections that are going around, but she's working hard and wish her well. I want to introduce my guest, who is a good friend of mine. I've known for a long time. Trust him completely. I respect his advice and opinion. I get his advice personally, professionally. He's the first person I go to when I really have a question about life here and maybe even life in general. So, Teitur, but I know you as Hedvig, you can explain that. Could you please let the people know who you are and your background, and we'll go from there.
Sure, Jeff. Well, thanks for having me on your podcast. I'm honored to be with you. Yes, well, my name is Hedvig or Teitur, which either you prefer. I was born as Hedvig and lived in Austria for the first 12 years of my life. And I was born to a Dutch father and an Austrian mother, and have no relatives here in Iceland other than my children. I have a very adventurous mother who just tries to live everywhere she can, and she's been long gone from Iceland, has been living in India and Africa, and is now back in Austria, but has bought herself a little cottage in Hungary. So very multinational, multicultural. And very early on, she took me traveling. So I actually missed the first 2 years of school, and I was homeschooled. And just hitchhiking through Europe, a bit of Israel, and so on. So that really gave me a lot and enriched my life in a way I think I still profit from today. Well, but back to that, I came to Iceland when I was 12 years old, was here 4 years in school, and went to Norway because I really wanted to learn another Nordic language besides the Icelandic language, and graduated from there. Went to Austria and took my tourism management degree there. Came back to Iceland, worked for McDonald's, where I was fortunate enough to meet Jeff some 20 years ago, and we've been really good friends since then. Well, then I started to work for a company that's running restaurants, and I started being a human resource manager there. I was a restaurant manager before that, and that's what sparked my interest in human resource management. Late in my life, I got my degree in business, and I'm just finishing my master's degree now in human resource management, and still working that now for a car company with about 100 employees. So that's my background. I do have relatives in Iceland now, which are my children, and so I have four children. Two of them live well, one of them lives in Borgarnes, and one of them here in Reykjavik in her own apartment, and two of the kids live at home with me.
All right. Thanks for that. Wow. So you've been living a life there. You got a lot of experience, which is another reason why I love talking to you, because you're not just, you got a lot of different avenues in which you've experienced. So, we'll go back to the beginning. When we met, I had just gotten into Iceland. I was a restaurant manager in the States for a franchise, a McDonald's franchise. And that's where we met. And I remember when we met that we were so similar in the way we thought about business that it was like refreshing, because it was a whole different thing I was coming into, and I was trying to learn it. Basically, like what brought me to this topic was, I remember when I came here, I was expecting, like for McDonald's, I was expecting a kind of a not too hard of a transition, but I didn't realize that it was almost the exact situation I experienced in the States in terms of the workforce, which was mostly immigrants. In the States, they mostly came from South American countries and spoke Spanish. And I remember as a manager navigating those issues with, how important it was to get to know the staff, their motivation, and to just work effectively. And when I came here, I remember coming to the kitchen and everybody was speaking English, and I was like, "Oh man, I didn't have to learn Icelandic." And the books were in English too, the management books, which what I studied as well. So, in my experience, I haven't in America. I experienced a lot of I don't know if it was classism. I'm not sure how you would define it, but every restaurant had a majority of foreigners in it, which I thought was interesting. I mean, we even had Italian restaurants with Mexicans running it, and we had Chinese restaurants with Italians in it. It was just like a weird kind of mishmash. And I remember I studied business administration in school at the time in America, and at the time they were talking about mergers and transitions, like I think it was Ford Motor Company had bought BMW or vice versa, or Jaguar or something, and they were talking about the different management styles and how American managers worked in Japanese companies and the issues and stuff they dealt with. I never thought much of it until I moved here and started seeing some of the issues that have arise as far as style and how the society views their immigrant population, where they are, and what they contribute to that particular country or whatever. So, and that being said, I wanted to know, you've worked in human resources and you've dealt with people from a few different backgrounds, and you've had to translate that into your superiors who are Icelandic. So have you encountered any like problems like that seem to be recurring in that area as far as employment?
Well, it really depends on which nations we're talking about. I mean, I come from a culture where very direct communication is appreciated. So you do a bad job, I tell you, Jeff, you're doing a bad job. You need to do a better job at this and that. When I came to Iceland, and I was very young when I started to run my own restaurant, only 25 years old, which is far too young to be a manager, let alone transition from, because the first steps of my employment history was in Germany and Austria, where this direct communication was appreciated, and it was just the way of doing things. And coming here, that was really, really difficult, because in Iceland, you don't tell somebody they do a bad job. You tell them how you might want to think about doing it differently in order to achieve a better result. And so on the things that have become second nature today, that was one of the very, very difficult things for me personally, just to adjust my communication style for me. And I've experienced this with then later on as an HR manager, having to convey the same knowledge to people who come from a more direct culture. On the other hand, I also have had to talk to employees as they think that this particular style of management, which we use here in Iceland, which is this soft beating around the bush, never talking directly about something, but still, achieving our goals, that it's not a sign of weakness when the manager asks you, what would you like to do? Would you like to do this or that? And, people from certain cultures will come and say, well, you're the manager. You tell me, don't you know what I'm supposed to do? Why are you asking me what I want to do? and so they have no respect for that kind of manager. So it's, well, in the end, just really, as always, trying to have a mutual understanding of what it is that we're expecting of each other.
That's an excellent point. Because I find, coming from the States, it's very direct as well. I mean, it's because it's also very fast paced from what the system I came from.
Sorry, Jeff, to interrupt you. You're saying very, very fast paced. One of the things that I, as a born Austrian, had the most difficult time is sjáum til. Ég ætla aðeins að sjá til með þetta. So let's just see this first. Let's think about this. And I'm like, what on earth? What kind of information could there possibly be added to the current information? And why can't you take a decision now? So yeah. That might be a hard thing for many foreigners.
No, I would, yeah, definitely. I mean, that was one thing that I remember when we were working together, and we kind of saw things the same when we were approaching our style as far as like like marking achievements, you know, like setting goals and pacing and stuff like this. Um, but for someone who's new, and you know, I'm sure you've seen and I've seen since I've been here, a change and a more of heavy emphasis on like tourism. And what that brings is like there's a lot of people who come travel and they're like, oh, I want to live here, or you know, oh yeah, this might be a great place to live. And I don't think they are thinking it's two different things to experience Iceland as a tourist and as someone who lives. So and there's been I've seen a lot of influencers and younger people who uh, want to start work or start a business in Iceland. As a matter of fact, one of my favorite photographers, Chris Burke, came here and opened an office. He's a photographer, which makes sense because it's Iceland. Um, and he had to hire an Icelandic crew, and he does a video where he just shows how they work, and he's kind of goofing on them. You know, he's like, "Oh, they're lying on the ground. What are they?" You know, it's like a whole different thing, but it's kind of funny and it's interesting to see, but not impossible. So for someone who like would want to come, someone who's coming in with that mindset, what would you advise them to consider uh, before making such a move?
Well, yeah, maybe one of the things, and I'm just reminded of my mother there because we just had this discussion a few days ago. One of the things that she found very difficult was to penetrate the Icelandic culture, to be able to acquire Icelandic friends, because an Icelander will hardly ask you over for coffee, just because, as you might see in other cultures. You know, if you look at an American movie where people come, you know, with pie and with gifts to the new neighbors, that's something just so foreign for us, you know, living here. So be advised that you might be alone, and that a lot of your closest communications or closest friendships will be with other foreigners who find themselves alone as well, because the Icelandic culture is not an easy one to get into, especially if you don't speak the language.
I would definitely concur with that. I consider you one of my good friends, and it's been a blessing. But when people ask me, you know, I really don't have Iceland. I have a lot of Icelandic acquaintances, people I know, but really good friends. I haven't developed that. Um, haven't seemed to develop good. There are a couple exceptions that are new, and I find that people who have traveled, Icelanders who have traveled, seem to be a little more open and understanding of like that a person who's from another country in Iceland, and what they might be experiencing. That being said, brings up an interesting opportunity. What from a foreigner's perspective first, and from the Icelandic perspective, what do you think would help um, along those lines as far as um, integrating and being able to feel as if you contribute or that you're a valued part of the country?
Well, the first and foremost, most important thing, in my opinion, was to learn the language. And I was fortunate enough. I was 12 years old when I came to Iceland, so my mouth hadn't developed fully, which means I managed to learn the Icelandic language in a way that Icelanders don't hear that I'm from a foreign country, actually. And I've put a lot of work into my grammar and really getting things right. And so that really helps. So from a foreigner's perspective, I say the most important thing is start to learn the language. And you know, one thing, people always started to talk English with me, and I said, you know, I really, please, I do know English, but I do not know Icelandic. So please talk Icelandic with me. That was one thing. Another thing I did, and that's just part of my nature, that I'm happy to be criticized because I want to be better. I want, whatever it is in life, I want to be better, and I never can get better if I don't know what I'm doing wrong, and then I need to know it frequently. So I stopped people once I had, finished speaking. I was my sentence correct? And I, saw that many people were taken aback by the question because they thought they would offend me. And I want to learn your language, but I can't learn it if you don't tell me what I'm doing wrong.
That is so interesting. That's a great point. Like you had talked earlier about like the perception difference, and how the management styles, how we approach things, and that's even socially, it probably has factors into it a little bit, because I find a lot. If I byrja tala íslensku and I mess up somewhere, they'll just default to English. And it's almost like, all right, let's get this over with. I worked in the private sector and in the public sector. In the public sector, where I work, there's so many foreigners there that English is the default just to get things done. And I work in hospitality, basically, in food service. So I deal with a lot of foreigners, and the Icelandic managers I deal with or have dealt with, like they can get by with the English. They know how to get things done. And then there's another level where nobody knows what's going on because it's all Icelandic. And it's like they're trying to get the foreigners like byrja tala íslensku, bara tala íslensku. But it's so like, man, it's like junk food. It's like English always just comes back up, Yeah. That's a great point. I would also say, there are those issues that arise with foreigners in the workforce, and I suppose it's the same in the States, because I experienced that as well with people who came from other countries, spoke very little English. In food service, I guess you can get by a little bit more because it's like, it's not that complicated. Meat, bun, cheese, whatever. But if you're going to ascend into higher levels, or even just get by on your life, I think you're exactly right. This issue came up as far as the COVID, because one of the coworkers I was with had no idea about the hälsogesut, but they didn't know how to log into the app or what it was saying, and they ended up having COVID. Like they got a notice, but they couldn't read it. They didn't know what's going on. So
there's one thing about the Icelandic people, which I have found when being here a foreigner for the first years, is that if you are unafraid to ask them for help, they are exceptionally helpful and exceptionally warm, really warm people that are that want you to succeed, although they may not always show it in the way. But if you ask them for help, there's this COVID thing going on. Could you help me with this heilsugæsla? There's, nobody I know would say, I don't care or whatever. They will always be helpful. And if I may continue a little bit with what we as foreigners can do, be part of a group, not just of the workforce, but do you like to sing? Join a choir. Do you like to play football? Join a football club. Whatever it is, get to know people in a social setting where you get to meet people. Some people probably go to church and you'll meet some nice people there. But try to form contacts with Icelandic people. From the Icelandic point of view, what we need to do is really get off our high horses. I say our because I do have the Icelandic citizenship now, so I am an Icelander full-fledged, and just speak to foreigners. They have a lot to offer. There is a lot of experiences and new ways of approaching things, and I personally like learning about other cultures and about why people see the things they see them in what way, what formed their experience. Why do we have now such a big group of foreigner people not wanting to get the vaccination for COVID? Well, it's rooted in a deep distrust of the government. We need to understand that, not judge it. Understand where it comes from. Talk to each other. See why we think differently.
I mean, this is such a great point. I mean, even our friendship, the reason that I value you as a friend is because you don't, first of all, we're similar in that you don't BS. If I'm messing up or you think I'm off or I'm wrong or your opinion's different than mine, you tell me. And like, I appreciate that because it helps me self-correct. It's always good to have that opposite voice. And I find if you can't handle that, you suffer from it in a way. You stagnate. And in the culture, if it's not open to what's already there, it stagnates. And I see that in the States, especially now. I grew up with a lot of different people from different backgrounds and learned so much more than I ever would if my group around me was insular or singular. And my own thought process of my home country, the US, is that it would not have done as many great things or come up with so many great processes, inventions, artists, scientists, if it wasn't somehow absorbing or embracing that foreign aspect. That being said, I always think about Iceland as, is it multicultural? There's a lot of cultures here, but it seems like they're insular. They're like, there's a large Polish contingent here. There's a large Thai and Philippine, and they all contribute to the society, but it seems unseen for me. It seems like disconnected and separated. In America, I never thought of the different groups, Polish, whatever, as separated. Never. I never thought, like, I have great friends with Polish immigrant background and Italian American in my own family. Irish, I mean, right off the boat. And like their thoughts and perceptions on work, life, relationships, my goodness, it's a life education. And I feel like Iceland's sort of at the beginning of it, because it seems like when I got here, I remember feeling so alone because I didn't see any other Black people around or people of color. Yeah, right. I really didn't. And I was like, oh man, what's going on here? But I mean, and speaking as a person of color, coming from the States and then coming here, I remember getting a lot of looks, and it's different in the States. Like, nobody pays attention to you much unless you're in like Beverly Hills or something. I don't know, but it's not really so much a thing. It depends on where you are. And here I got a lot of looks, and it means something totally different in the States. It means like somebody, and the thing is, it's a fear thing. It's a fear on both sides, right? For me, my experience has always been like, if someone's staring at me in a store, it's like they think I've done something. So I think, oh, what am I doing? I make sure did I do something weird? Like that goes through my mind. Here, if it happens, the same thing goes through my mind. It causes stress a little bit. It's really interesting because as a person of color, it's very obvious that I'm not Icelandic, And what I have found is that when you have a society that's very singular and insular, how do you get beyond any stereotype that you've learned? Because you have no other resource. And I find that could be a complication in managers who have not had experience with foreigners, and might lead to a lot of miscommunication and misunderstanding. Like, I thought to myself, gee, people in Iceland should feel really relaxed around me, because like, what am I going to do? That the Black guy robbed me. What Black guy? There's only 5. As opposed to like any other Icelanders to be like, a blonde, blue-eyed guy robbed me. Okay, it's gonna take a while. I always thought to myself, I should be the most accepted person, because like, what's he gonna do? Like, what's he gonna? Right. And the Black guy robbed the car. It's probably Jeff. Call him up. So, It's such a, like, I always felt like that I'm the most relaxed. I recently got my citizenship and I was very proud to do so. So I'm always curious, learn about things. I love talking to, especially the older generation here, because their view on Iceland and what's happening now and what it was is so enlightening. And it helps me embrace the culture, like understand where people are coming from. Like, so that there's less misunderstanding I have now because I was able to actually have conversations with some Icelanders who have seen change and like they know like the heart and soul of the country basically, you know. And I think it's really interesting for me to try to get a grasp on, like, in America we have these values, this, you know, I don't know, this kind of this thing, the freedom, you know. And I'm like, well, what is that for Iceland? What is that for Iceland? And what does it mean with this population? We should, foreigners should feel like they contribute, that they are valued, and that's important for integration. If few of those things are missing, it becomes a very take mentality, I think. Mm-hmm. You know, like, what can I take instead of what can I give? You know what I mean?
Yeah, right. I mean, well, few interesting things you said here about you thinking when you're being stared at, did I do something wrong? Because how I feel, and of course I'm in no position to be a judge of if this is a correct assessment of the information or of the you know, is if I see a black person or a person of color, any color, I look because it's different, not because I think they've done something wrong, but just, wow, you know, I study the features, I study the hair, I study the posture, the demeanor, how they bear themselves, because it's just different from Icelandic people. And not because there's something wrong or because I think it's weird or whatever. It's just different. I want to see it. And that has sort of been my experience when I've been talking to other Icelandic people about, you know, doesn't matter which group that is a minority, if it's people of color, immigrants, because you do have people of color here in Iceland who are totally Icelandic because they just were adopted, you know, from Sri Lanka 40 years ago. There was a big batch of kids who came over from Sri Lanka. You have the Vietnamese kids. They're also completely, you know, Icelandic with Icelandic parents because they grew up here. And if it's that minority, or I've found the Icelandic people actually as a very accepting nation of different things, although they don't integrate. I completely agree with that, but very accepting. Okay, this, you know, you do you, I do me. We'll just live in peace together. And I'm saying this also because I know at least, well, you know, I'm talking here like I think I'm some kind of expert, which I'm definitely not. And I hope nobody misunderstands or thinks that I fully understand people who say they've been discriminated against. It's just that this is my personal experience. I know of, you know, 2 foreign gay men who immigrated to Iceland because it's here they finally found acceptance and peace. They didn't find the judgment they experienced back home.
Oh, so man, let me just interject, because you bring up so many good points. It's like, what you said is totally correct. And my ex-wife had also kind of prefaced that to me as well. Like, if someone's staring at you, it might not mean what you think. The thing is that where I come from, and if you look at the news in the States, like these Karens, so to speak,
yeah,
that could lead to a very bad confrontation.
Oh yeah.
Someone's misperception of you can have a tragic outcome in the States. Like, so if someone thinks you stole something, or someone's, you know, eyeing you because they think you're suspicious, that takes on almost a life and death thing in the States, where you really gotta know something, because there's that underlying current in the States that hasn't, in my opinion, fully been addressed, the racial component. And a lot of people seem to dismiss and they don't want to think about it because it's really kind of heavy and deep. But as a people who, you know, up until the 60s had been discriminated against, and there's this silent underneath tension, as you see with the George Floyd, it's always been there. I mean, comedians from Richard Pryor to Dave Chappelle today have always mentioned like interactions with the police and their perceptions of going into places or being followed and stuff like this. It's almost like you talk about victimization. It's a long-term mental thing within the Black community, African American community specifically. That
Noah Trevor, who is actually South African, who moved to the States, he experienced the same thing. I think I even sent you a video the other day, where he he compares the South African police to the police in America, and where in South Africa it's not a life and death thing. It's a thing of negotiation if you speed, but in the United States it might very well mean your death if you say the wrong thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like the one thing you hear in those interactions is like a cop will say, "Well, I feared for my life." It's like you're holding a gun, the other person wasn't. How are you afraid? So because there's been kind of that stereotype, right? And that stereotype, what I discovered living in Iceland, isn't necessarily restricted to the United States at all. We see those interactions in all parts of Europe, in France, Germany. And the thing is that, so that's how it's usually perceived from my perspective. And I have to do a lot of mental calculations to just make sure that I'm not overreacting or stressing myself out or whatever it is. But I think on the other side, if you understood that it goes back to the Emmett Till case, right? A white lady said, "This little Black kid whistled at me. Their husbands come and murdered a kid." And then like on her deathbed, she says, "Well, that never happened." And it's like, so that's just kind of it's hard to really put all that into a short section, but from my perspective as a person of color, that's kind of how I've entered into even my work life. I've learned a lot from you. I've learned a lot from just my studies in business, that perception is everything, really. They talked about management style when I was in the McDonald's University. And they said, if you see someone sitting, what is your first thought? And a lot of people were like, "Oh, they're lazy, something happened, blah, 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 blah." It was all negative. And they were like, "Well, did you ask the person?" And it's like, it's something totally different. "Oh, they were on their break." Well, your perception and then what you say from that to other people can totally put someone in a disadvantage. So coming back to being in Iceland, if the two different cultures, we have many different cultures, foreigners and natives, and if there's no interaction between the two, I think the chance of misunderstanding is really high.
Oh, yes.
And motivation can be really high. However, I also think the opportunity to learn from both is very present, but it needs to be where both sides are open to it, really.
Yes, and I've learned so much from you, the way, why you think as a person of color, the way you think. Because for me, as you remember, it was all so foreign to me, because where I grew up in Austria, there were very, very few people of color, but nobody ever thought anything of that. And that might also be because of where I grew up, with which people I grew up. I did not grow up in a racist environment, or in an environment where people saw color, we saw persons. But I'm so aware of, coming from Austria, coming from all that horror that this country has in its history, and also in its present day, that racism is very much alive and very much present in some circles, which I don't have any interest of being in. I know nobody who is racist, probably because I just don't have anything in common with people who think that way. but I'm so aware of, and especially now, getting to know you and getting the real perspective from a person of colors, again, helped me to understand better, because it was hard for me to understand where do people of color come from. I don't know anybody who feels that way. I don't feel that way, certainly not. So what is it? What are they on about? But yeah, I mean, talking to you, our friendship has shown me why. I'm very much aware of it. Why today?
Yeah, it's so, basically, I guess we're saying communication is really key. If
Yes.
foreigners are to thrive in Iceland, they have to be more open and willing to put themselves in, like, that was a great idea. Like, join an organization, get around people, because, being foreign and being around a lot of foreigners, I hear a lot of negative things said about Icelanders. That's not true, because I have my family, my kids are Icelandic,
Yeah.
born and raised here, so much so that when we go home, even the kids who know my kids, they know that they act totally different. Like, their whole perception of everything is just totally different.
Yes.
So, to me, it's like a beautiful thing, because it's all about growth and it's all about learning. Looking forward into Iceland, where we are, this COVID thing, geez, but I'm curious, like, what is Iceland going to be in another 5 to 10 years? Because it was so different. Like, when we met, you remember it was even kind of different then. It's been so shifting, pretty big steps. I mean, even downtown Reykjavik is nothing like when.
No, nothing like it.
When we got here. Well, so moving forward, and especially given the interactions that you see and you've experienced, like, are you optimistic for, like, moving forward? Like, what is ahead for Iceland as far as its population and integration, and how it's going to be able to manage that going forward?
One thing I'm very happy about is that we now even have HR companies, private companies, who specialize in integration. And we have louder voices within my profession where we say, it's important to be diverse. And diversity doesn't just mean, having women and men, and having old and young, and all of that thing, but having different cultures. We have the big oil companies who think 10 years ahead, and they have started integrating many years ago, and starting to get people from all kind of cultures with all kind of views on things, and they just to see they make the company better. We're still missing real empirical data on it, but we all know it's true. So I'm optimistic in that regard. What I'm afraid of is what you came in on a little bit earlier, is this forming of groups. There can never come anything good of that. We need to start talking to each other. We need to, foreigners need to go into groups. Icelanders need to open up and maybe, take the first step, although it's not our second nature or our nature to do so, but take a step, get to know a foreigner. So in that way, yes, I am optimistic, but also a little bit afraid that, it warmed my heart to see, for example, when all those some Afghan families came here to Iceland now a few months ago, and there was a real integration program in a small town, and this I think is the very best way of doing it. People starting to work there, and this real love of your next person, no matter where they come from. And they seemed very happy. The Afghan family seemed very happy. The Icelandic population seemed very happy. And that for me is a very successful integration. We need also, we really need to stop thinking of any foreign people coming as a threat to the culture or a threat to the community. They're not. They're enriching. And wherever we go, we see that people who came from other countries, immigrants, they've always managed to make more business, to make things go even better than before. So there's nothing saying that, you know, there's no foreigner taking your job. You know, that's not a thing. So yes, I'm optimistic, a little bit afraid. We need to, we just need all to be sensible. We need to communicate.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I think too. I'm hopeful because of my kids. I see my kids and their friends, and their views on things are a lot very open, and the way they look at things are very. They reserve judgment. At least my kids. I've taught them to be slow to judge anything, and to get as much information about something before you do make your judgment. So with the younger generation that I've seen, including your daughter, who I ran into, I'm very optimistic, and see through them what is possible moving forward. I always, my own personal work life, I've always wanted to. It's always been from the point of wanting to do better, to contribute. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you that is really so I can feel a part of and connected to. If I don't have those two things, or feel relevant, or feel like replaceable, then I have no investment in it. And as someone who is a citizen, who has a foot in this door of coming from somewhere else, I see that is really a challenge to let people know that, yes, what you do is valuable. Mm-hmm. I mean, when you look at how COVID happened, the people who continued to go to work, you know, were a lot of the foreigners. They do a lot of the low-level jobs that you don't really think about until they're not there. Mm-hmm. And so it's important for us as Icelanders and for us as a society as a whole to embrace and appreciate that in this population, and for the native population to embrace that population as well, because otherwise you have that disconnect. You know, it reminds me of like in the States when Trump was like, build the wall, and like, oh, we want to keep these Mexicans out, right? And they're like, well, the farmers who lived on the border were like, who's gonna work for who's gonna work doing all this stuff? Because nobody in the States wants to do these jobs. These are where the jobs come from. It's like a baseline for that society, for American society. And now in the States, you see they're closed. The COVID thing is having its effect, of course, but the workers who are like your clerks, your grocery store, garbage, sewage, all these like low-level jobs, and like, if they're not there, we got a problem. The truck drivers who you know, we don't even think about, you know, in Britain, you know, they had the little Brexit, like, okay, well, now there's no truck drivers, so nothing's getting delivered. You know, it's like, it's important, I think, going forward to look, just you got to acknowledge it. You got to acknowledge it, and beyond that, really embrace it, because it only makes the society stronger, and better. So we're coming to the end of our discussion. I'm just you give me some things to really rethink about, which I always do after we talk. And I appreciate you coming on and sharing everything that you did. I think more of these discussions among bigger groups would be helpful. And that's kind of why we do the podcast, to get these discussions that you might not hear other places, that people might be able to take something from, you know, hopefully, and do something positive with. So with that, I want to thank you for coming and talking.
Thanks for having me.
See you soon, because you know, life gets boring without my friends. Loivi, I want to thank for helping us with this recording, and Boye and Samstöðin for the opportunity to put this together and do this. There's a lot of people who who are Icelandic, who are interested in just putting this content out there and connecting people and just trying to progress and make Iceland the best it can be with what we have. So I want to thank everybody for that. And with that, thank you for coming. And we'll just we'll next time we'll have something else. And I hope to have you back for maybe some other stuff we can talk about. Okay.
Thanks, Jeff. It was a pleasure talking to you.
All right.